Now, literary elements and literary devices are word phrases that are used interchangeably. If you hear someone referring to literary devices and another person use the phrase literary elements, they are both talking about the same writing techniques used by writers. These two terms do apply to the over 140 writing techniques. Just so you know, literary devices, literary elements, figurative language, and rhetorical devices are all called writing techniques. Often the phrases figurative language or rhetorical devices are used when talking about literary elements or literary devices. That is because some literary terms are also considered figurative languages and rhetorical devices. Now, there are over 140 literary devices or literary elements. Since figurative language or rhetorical devices only apply to literary devices for non-literal figures of speech, you cannot use the term figurative language or the term rhetorical devices to mean all of the over 140 devices or elements. Figurative language and rhetorical devices are writing techniques that have hidden meanings in their word or word phrases. They are non-literal, meaning that the words used or the phrases used are not meant to be factual or realistic. Think of examples for simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, and allusion. These are some examples of devices that fall under the heading of figurative or rhetorical language. That does not mean these are not considered literary devices. They are. It's just these devices can be separated from the other devices in that the words used are not to be read or understood as being true. The devices act to hide the true meaning in a sentence or sentences based on the context of the story. Again, just remember that figurative language, rhetorical devices, does not refer to all of the literary devices. An example would be the child's tumor is as big as an elephant. This is an impossible sized tumor for a human child's body. Another example would be corn and sugarless gum are my kryptonite, which cannot be true since neither corn nor sugarless gum are fictional meteorites pieces from Krypton, and I'm not a Supergirl or Superman, so I have no powers to drain. In order to excel at writing the analysis essays, you must be able to recognize and know the author's purpose for using the literary device or literary element in context of the passage given. I will mostly use word phrases like literary devices, and sometimes I will use literary elements. Remember that both mean the same and are key, that is critical and very important to writing analysis. Why? Because they help the reader understand the underlining what the author wants the reader to comprehend to successfully answer the why of the prompt according to the rubric. Below are two web links that help define and give the purpose of the literary element. Usually within the first two paragraphs of each device, there will be a sentence explaining the author's purpose for using the writing technique. Using one of the links, the definition of a flashback is a memory, tale, or interlude to assist the reader in predicting and understanding the words and actions of a character based on the character's past experiences. Now, looking in the black rectangle, what you need to focus on is the reason or purpose for why the author uses the technique. It is to give the background motivations to deepen understanding of the character's internal conflict and to increase tension or evoke sympathy. Here is where you need to insert passage or prompt related information. So I could change the purpose to background motivations to deepen understanding of the character's internal conflict to increase tension in the storyline or evoke sympathy from the reader. Now I want you to notice how I inserted the keywords in bracket and then look at the underlined words that give me a hint to other literary devices that I may find in the text as well. This is how you need to interpret the text on the web links because the definition can change with each passage. The bracketed information is needed because not every text read will have the same storyline. What if there is a poem about flowers? Yet that poem could evoke feelings. So I would look through the poem to discover what specific flashback examples in the lines evoke feelings. Notice how the purpose and that definition, that knowledge, helps you determine how you need to relook at your passage for examples. The reasons for learning this is for you to effectively be able to answer the why and what. Why did the author use this writing device for comprehension of the text? And what effect does this writing technique have on the reader? When we look at flashback on the web link, the definition or why is to give the character's past in context to the present to foretell and explain how the character will react in the future. The purpose or the what is its effect in context to the passage, and this could be to help the reader understand what past events affect or influence the character during the current conflict in the passage. Now, I want to point out that devices regularly overlap with other devices. This is wonderful in that it helps you transition from one paragraph to the next. Let me show you how. Now, remember how I underlined the words motivation and conflict to signal two other devices that exist? Motivation is a literary device that tells why a character thinks or acts a certain way for whatever internal or external reason. Now, inside motivation is conflict, which can also act as a literary device. Now, as a writer, I can either include that information in the same paragraph for flashback, or I can create 1 to 2 separate paragraphs. Just know, if I decide to separate, I'll have to make sure I'm using 3 different examples than the ones that I use for flashback in order to prove for motivation. Likewise, if I decide to use for conflict, I have to make sure that I use 3 examples that are different from the other 1 or 2 literary devices I write about. To see how I take this information from the what and why and apply it to formatting, creating my sentences and my paragraphs, you'll definitely need to watch either my prose, literary argument, or poetry analysis videos. Also, throughout this video, you'll see these images in those rectangles. Well, it's from a file I created for my students. It has, I think, around 40 literary devices with images like you'll see. I tend to include images or context clues to help in understanding the definition of the device through one-shot visual look. I do this in my instruction to speed up processing of what and why of the literary device is. Anyway, if you're interested in receiving the document, please hit the subscribe button and message me. I will forward the document or a link for you to download the file if you want it. Here are images from the file where I show that first person uses me, my, I, we, us, our, ours, and similar. Second person uses you, your, yours, and yourself. Third person limited and omniscient both use he, his, him, her, she, hers, they, them, their, and it. Where limited shares the thoughts and feelings of only one person, omniscient shares the thoughts and feelings of many people. When analyzing a passage by an author, you must know why the author uses that point of view. Like first person is to share the character's thoughts, but also limits the reader's perspective on what is seen and known in the story. Second person is to bring the reader into the story. This technique is rarely used by writers since not all readers can relate to the situation in the text. Third person is so the reader knows every thought and reasoning of the characters as permitted by the writer. As permitted is underlined to remind you that the author wants the reader to interpret the actions or words of the characters in the passage in a certain order. Now, the what will always refer to the specific piece of text that can be used as evidence. Since this is point of view, you include or refer to a specific action or quote from the text for evidence. How do I know I need to include that type of textual evidence? Notice the underlined words of actions and words. That immediately signals to use actions or quotes stated by the character in the passage. Also, I want you to notice there is another overlapping of literary device here. The underlined words hint that I should look at diction as another literary device to prove the argument of the essay. Realize that for setting, there are two types, cultural and physical. Both are based on how the character was reared from childhood to an adult and in the time and place the character has lived. Pause the video to notice that physical setting includes the items circled in red. Cultural setting are the items not circled. Setting gets the reader to determine what environmental aspects affect the decisions and activities of a character in a text. Why is setting important? It creates a world revolving around the passage in the character's life. It establishes mood, tone, and helps in discovering the plot, characters, and theme. Setting also structures the underlying reasons why the character behaves the way they do and enriches or enhances the events in the story. Setting helps the reader, the what, relate to the situation of the character, which helps in relating to the plot, theme, and scenes in the story. Based on the information of the why and what, I need to focus on the plot and characters' actions. For physical setting, I need to be able to relate what is happening in the text to either a historical or present event with a similar situation. I think that's pretty neat. I received these information all from the web links below, and they're basically just guiding me on how to prove my argument in the essay. The only thing I need to get skilled at really is determining what devices are used in the text. Now that you've seen how 3 literary devices serve a writer's purpose, I want to share how at least 2 sentences could be developed by splicing the knowledge of the setting with parts of a passage. For example, using the setting in A Thousand Splendid Suns, written by Khaled Hosseini, the main character, Miriam, is being executed for killing her husband when he was in the process of murdering Layla, his second wife. He was upset for her constantly verbally confronting him at home about his treatment of females in the house. Miriam is executed under her Islamic community law that there is no reason a woman is to confront or defend herself against a man, and it is unthinkable if she even thinks to kill a man. Yet at her execution, Miriam becomes hopeful because her actions afforded Layla's daughter, and Layla's son the opportunity to live free of abuse. In answering my why, I could write lines 32 through 35 of Miriam's execution, share that Miriam's mood changes when she admits to herself that though life had not been kind, she wished for more of it, when before Layla, she wished for it to end. To answer my what, I could write, in A Thousand Splendid Suns, the cultural setting of Miriam's execution surprisingly evoked hope for females living in a religiously patriarchal country. Notice this is not the complete paragraph, and the sentences do not flow together. There is no fluent thought connecting the two. Yet, with these 2 sentences, I have interested the reader in wondering how I, thinking as if I was the writer, will connect the why and the what. I need to connect the statements to make them valid and logical, which will be easy to explain why a woman in an abusive marriage would yearn for more life by elaborating on how Layla had given Miriam hope about the future. It is that hope felt by Miriam at her execution. Since this is an AP essay, when referencing setting, I do enjoy it making my students be specific on whether they're basing their argument on the consequence of the culture or the environment. It is not necessary to be written. I just want the reader and my students to understand how and where someone is raised majorly affects law and religious reasoning. For those of you who have seen my video on 6 W's of prose, this part of the literary device video is about entailment. For those of you who have seen my video on literary devices and are now watching my 6 W's video, this part of the video is about entailment. I did a joke there. Yeah, I'm not a good comedian. Anyway, by looking at your answer for why the author used a particular technique in each of the body paragraphs, you can see the relationship between sentences whereby one sentence or idea will be true if all the others are also true. Using the passage text, there will be a connection or purpose to why the author chose a specific literary element as a writing technique. This is highly dependent on your chosen examples from the passage. Looking at the breakdown of the author's purpose for imagery, diction, point of view, and setting, these are examples. The author's purpose for writing is for the reader to learn from the text. The author does this by using multiple writing techniques for literary devices. For those who struggle in how multiple devices can prove an argument, or if you find it difficult to state why or how the devices can support other devices, notice the overlapping of the highlights. Diction in green can support imagery and setting with this word choice. Setting in blue can support point of view and imagery. Point of view can validate imagery, diction, and setting. And imagery, with its 5 senses, can support diction, point of view, and setting. This allows you to see how you can mentally transition from one device to the other while at the same time giving additional proof of your argument for the device. This is why you sometimes get overlapping in your answers, and it's perfectly normal. Do you want to learn more on how to think while writing? Click on any of the videos you see here or below, post questions below, and I will respond or upload a specific video to demonstrate a clarifying answer. If you feel you've learned the thought process that helps you with writing, please click the thumbs up, or even better, share with someone else who you think would benefit to watching. And I definitely would appreciate it if you subscribed.